Chapter 11. Sisters. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. This reading by Lucy Burgoyne. Sisters by Ada Cambridge. Chapter 11. Captain Carey, while leaving it to be understood that he held himself engaged to Mary Pennycuick until further orders, realised the welcome fact that in the meantime he was honourably free, and he excused himself from staying to dinner. But scarcely had he driven off in his hired buggy than that of Mr Goldsworthy clattered into the stable-yard. It was the good man's habit, when on his parochial visitations, to make Redford at meal-times, or at bed-times, whenever distances allowed. He called it, most appropriately, his second home, and walked into the house as if it really belonged to him 2 or 3 times a week. The first person that he encountered on this occasion was Frances, who had waylaid Guthrie Carey on his departure, and whom he had left standing under the back porch, aglow with excitement. She was a picture in her pale blue frock, put on for his eyes, and with her mane of burnished gold falling about her sparkling blush-rose face, but the parson, accustomed to regard her as a child, was unaffected by the sight. "Surely," he exclaimed, with agitation, "that was young Mr Carey that I passed at the gate just now? He had his hat pulled over his eyes, and did not stop to speak to me, but the figure—" "Was his," said Frances, bursting to be the first to say it. "Very much in the flesh still, isn't he? And oh, to think he's gone like this, just as we'd got him back. So big and handsome, and such a dear brother-in-law as he would have made." She stamped her foot. "What do you think, Mr Goldsworthy? He came for her to-day, just as he promised, and then she turned round and wouldn't have him. We thought he'd jilted her, and instead of that she's jilted him. Oh, I could smack her, to have such a chance, she, and after all the fuss she made about him, and throw it away. But I think he'll come back before his ship sails. He said he would, and perhaps she'll be less of an idiot by then. She'd better, unless she wants to die an old maid. Oh, if it was me!" Mr Goldsworthy penetrated to the morning room, where something of the same tale was repeated to him. Yes, Guthrie Carey was alive and well, and had been up to see them. Yes, he had asked for Mary, now that he was a captain, but she had finally decided against marrying a sailor. Wisely, perhaps; at any rate, it was her business. The family did not wish to discuss the matter. When Mr Goldsworthy found that Mary did not come to dinner, he drew some conclusions for himself. He told himself there was something fishy in the affair, something behind, that was purposely kept from him. But he was hungry, and the fragrant soup steamed under his nose and glittered in his spoon. It was so admirably clear. Just now, the doings of the Redford cook were of more concern to him than Mary's doings. But although he enjoyed the meal to which he had looked forward all day, he enjoyed it much less than usual. A more sensitive person in his place must have found it wretched. Deb was a chilling hostess. Her frigid dignity and forced politeness caused discomfort even to him, thereby lowering her status in his eyes, lessening the ardour of his admiration for her. Mr Pennycuick, such a stickler for hospitality, scarcely spoke a word to the guest. Rose was a nobody, but still might have done something in the way of entertainment, and she quite ignored him, looking down as if to hide eyes that had been crying. Frances was eager to engage in conversation, but was bidden roughly by her father to hold her tongue. The stately governess wore only more ostentatiously than usual the detached air that always marked her out of school, and it was left to poor Miss Keene, with her timid platitudes, to keep up an appearance of civility. Mr Pennycuick vanished abruptly after dinner. It was presently rumoured that he was not well, and had gone to bed. Frances was taken away to prepare lessons. Rose and Deborah came and went. Coffee was served. The parson was again left to Miss Keene, who would not be pumped for confidences, further than to admit that Mary was keeping her room with a headache, in consequence of the agitating visit of Captain Carey, but laboriously talked parish to him, without appearing to know anything of the subject. So the poor man actually became so bored that he changed his mind about staying for the night. He remembered that there was a good moon, and that he had an early engagement next morning, and ordered his buggy soon after 9 o'clock. Afterwards he believed that it was the direct voice of the Lord that had called him to take his journey home at that hour. He drove alone, having a steady Redford mare, that stood quietly at gates and doors, and no groom, a luxury almost unknown amongst country parsons, who must all keep horses. The night was beautiful, still, cool, and clear, the moon so full that he could see for miles. Because of this, he took his daylight short cuts across country, preferring grass when he could get it to the dusty summer road, and one of his short cuts led along the top of the embankment of the big dam. He slackened speed at this spot, touched by the beauty of the scene, which could hardly have appealed in vain to any man who had just had a good dinner. How peacefully the still water lay under the shining moon, that moon which is capable of making, not soft young lovers only, but the toughest old staggers sentimental, nay, maudlin at times, an intoxicant purged of the grossness of spirituous liquors, but acting on the brain in precisely the same way. Mr Goldsworthy, already uplifted by good Redford wine, felt the effect of the lovely night in dim poetic stirrings of his sordid little soul. He mused of God and heaven, and the other things that he made sermons out of, in a disinterested, unprofessional way. These being the lines along which his imagination worked. "Surely the Lord is in this place," was the unspoken thought, elevating and inspiring, with which he surveyed the placid lake and the dreaming hills. "And it is good for me to be here," he felt, even at the cost of a Redford bed and breakfast, and the choice vegetables that the gardener would have put into his buggy in the morning. But what was this? A boat adrift. From out of the shadow of the white shed on the further shore, a black spot moved, one of the boats that should have been locked up, since no one was allowed to use them without Mr Pennycuick's permission. It came into the open moonlight, in the middle of that silver mirror, and he saw that oars propelled it, and saw the figure of the person wielding them. Who had dared to take this liberty with sacred Redford property, he wondered, with the indignation of a co-proprietor, and he assumed a poacher after the fish that Mr Pennycuick had been trying with characteristic perseverance and unsuccess to naturalise in his dam. But looking harder, the clergyman saw the figure rise in the boat, and that it was a woman's. Almost at the same instant he saw that it had disappeared. Seizing whip and reins, he lashed his mare to a gallop along the embankment, and down its steep side, where she nearly upset him, and round the lake shore, the buggy rocking like a cradle, to the point nearest to the boat, now visibly